14 pambuyo potumiza CV yanu ndiye kuti simunasankhidwe. Channel Africa, kalilole wa Africa.
Speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an...
Coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on Channel Africa Radio from an African perspective. I'm Lulu Gaboo. I'm in studio with Jwalani Tulongwepe, Figileli Ngwati, and Buntle Headbush. Coming up in this hour.
We are declaring war on these illegal buildings. Those that have been hijacked, that have private owners, we want them to come forward.
Over 40 undocumented foreign nationals arrested for occupying hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg in South Africa. And a new journal makes crucial findings on preterm birth and newborn care. But first up...
The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good day. Nigeria's opposition is facing growing uncertainty ahead of the 2027 general elections, with fresh cracks emerging in the newly formed All Democratic Alliance. A former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi has confirmed he will contest the election, but has ruled out the possibility of running on a joint ticket with former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. The decision has stirred debate about the future of the alliance, which was meant to unite key opposition figures under one front. Political analyst Austin Aigbe.
The Nigerians are looking for an alternative, that what they need is not a PDP as an opposition. What they need is not a Labour Party as an opposition. They don't even need an NPP. Three major parties who ran against the APC in 2023. Of this time, they are no longer viable because the opposition has been literally diminished. So a new party is what may likely wrestle power in 2027. So the alternative is that if the ADA is not registered, we will go with ADC. But I think the essence of registering a new political party will be better for them.
The acting mayor of Johannesburg in South Africa, Kenny Kunene, is expected to resume operations targeting hijacked buildings in the city's central business district today. Yesterday, Kunene and law enforcement officers raided a hijacked building in Marshalltown, which led to the arrest of over 40 undocumented foreign nationals. The operations are part of a revitalization plan approved by the mayoral committee in March as a coordinated effort to reclaim the inner city. Kunene elaborates.
The purpose was to enforce bylaws, but also to disconnect illegally connected electricity and water. And indeed, we achieved that. EMS has prepared a report after they did an assessment that the building is unsafe, the building is uninhabitable, and therefore the people must be evacuated. So we will go back to the building. I'm meeting with the MMC of Social Development to see if there's alternative shelter where we can then evacuate South Africans to.
Meanwhile, Kunene says undocumented foreign nationals will be deported to countries of origin, and plans have been put in place to demolish the building.
We will come back, take out South Africans that are here to an alternative shelter and demolish this quarter camp that is in here. Hand over the building to the owner, but also see how do we then assist the owner if they want to renovate the building or if they want to sell the building, so that the syndicates don't hijack the building.
Political analyst Ntsikelelo Breakfast says the Umkhonto weSizwe Party in South Africa needs to institutionalize democracy within its structures if it wants to achieve a positive electoral trajectory. This, as he says, decision-making in the party often centers around its leader and founder Jacob Zuma, citing that it can be problematic. His comments come amid rising tensions with calls for the removal of some high-ranking party members. Breakfast says MKP members appear to be hostile hostile towards individuals who are not part of the party's formation.
It's an open secret. Decision-making revolves around former President Zuma. No doubt about that. That's why the letter was written to him. One of the letters, it was addressed to him. That is a problem. I don't think party members must accept that uncritical. They need to engage with that. Under normal circumstances, in a democracy, people must be free to express their views strongly about those issues. So now, if you must be sensitive to this person, that is not a democratic party. That is something else now. And that is going to affect the growth of the party.
The Tibetan Buddhist spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, has confirmed that he will have a successor after his death. He made the long-awaited announcement in Dharamsala in northern India, where he lives in exile from Chinese rule. In a statement, the Dalai Lama said only the Gaden Podrang Foundation, which he founded, has the authority to recognize his future reincarnation. In response, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama needed to be approved by China's central government. The BBC's Samira Hussain has the story.
The way that the tradition goes is that, a successor is going to be chosen upon his death. It's when they will find usually a young boy who will represent the reincarnation of this 14th Dalai Lama and then continue the work that he has already begun. Now what's going to happen is that the number of monks that have come from all over South Asia and internationally are going to gather, and they're going to interpret that message. And then they will also keep in mind what it is that the Dalai Lama has said that he wants for his future.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African perspective.
In our sports headline, Proteas left arm spinner Keshav Maharaj has been ruled out of the second test against Zimbabwe. And Jesse Kriel will lead the Springboks against Italy again after his successful leadership against the Barbers. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, thank you to Jalani Tulongwepe with our news update and Figureli Ngwati with our sports headlines. It is 12:07 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on DSTV's audio bouquet channel 802, an OpenView channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Apple and Google Play stores. And join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763 as 4069126 #Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Today on #Africa Update asks, politics and political parties can be a stumbling block for a country. Now, which country would you say has the best leadership on the continent, and what can we learn from them? So what can we learn from the country that you believe has the best leadership on the continent? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms.
Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
Our aid agencies say the situation in northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province continues to deteriorate, with fresh reports revealing a sharp rise in child abductions and mass displacements. Now, they say at least 120 children have been kidnapped by armed groups since the beginning of the year. As according to figures released by the local non-governmental organization Gwendelea, many of the abducted children are believed to have been forced into combat roles or subjected to forced marriages. Now, at the same time, thousands of civilians continue to flee their homes to escape the escalating violence. And to discuss this further, we have Piers Piju from International Crisis Group. Piers, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
It's a great pleasure, Lulu, and welcome. Hello to the viewers. I should just clarify, I'm independent consultant. I'm no longer with the International Crisis Group.
All right, thank you, Piers, for that. Now, let's talk about the crisis and the people in Cabo Delgado. What needs to be done to address the root causes of the conflict in your view? And especially just considering that resources are at the center of all of this.
Well, I think, in terms of an ongoing consideration in the Mozambican environment is to understand the nature of the conflict itself, the drivers of conflict and so forth, and to put in place a strategy, both in terms of hard security, but in terms also of a broader counterinsurgency strategy that will deal with considerations for local communities that are affected by this conflict. This has now been going on since the end of 2017 in terms of the armed conflict, but the underlying factors have been in play really for generations now in the Mozambican setting, and the socio-economic drivers which have provided space for exploitation by external forces and by radicalized internal elements are really keeping a pilot light under this conflict. And the Mozambican government has struggled both in terms of its hard security response, but also in terms of its soft security and its development response to address the key drivers in play. And so we are likely to see a continuation of this kind of problem that you outlined at the beginning of this segment.
Now, you've touched on the authorities having difficulties. What sort of difficulties, or why are they failing at bringing stability in that particular region, especially with international companies running operations there?
Well, one has to also place this in a broader context of the challenges facing the Mozambican state more broadly, both in terms of its macroeconomic, its fiscal constraints. But also, essentially, really, it's about what is the strategy that's being employed. On the hard security front, we have a security force, both police and military, that are essentially not fit for purpose, and notwithstanding efforts to train and develop their capacities, that is still very much a work in progress. In addition, there is a huge reliance on external forces. We saw the SADC forces in country between 2020 and July last year, and there is a heavy reliance on over 4,500 Rwandan troops that are up there, providing essentially static security for large parts of the province. But large parts of the province are not effectively being looked after. So what this means in terms of pursuing insurgents is that, as a former colleague of mine used to say, it's a bit akin to pushing bad food around a plate. Insurgents don't look for contact when the Rwandans and Mozambican forces are seeking them out, which is rare, it would seem, in terms of effective counterinsurgency. We also see no aerial assets in play really at the moment, which is a critical component of any counterinsurgency. So that's the problem on the hard security front. On the broader development front, you have communities that have been displaced over the last 7 years. Hundreds of thousands of people moved from place to place, many in a kind of semi-displacement arena where they've been able to go back to the district towns in their provinces, but not back to their communities at all, because they're extremely vulnerable. And also the aid agencies, the humanitarian agencies, can't get out there to support them with food supplies, with medicine and so forth. So you have hundreds of thousands of people living effectively in limbo in the current context.
Now, just with everything that's happening and everything unfolding, Rwandan forces on the ground, what needs to be done, especially by the international community, which seems have sort of not really forgotten, but not focusing on a crisis that is continuing in Mozambique, in that northern part of Mozambique, Cabo Delgado province?
Well, Lulu, this has to be put in a broader global context, and of course the conflict in Cabo Delgado, just in the context of African crises, whether it's the problems in the Sahel or Sudan or elsewhere in the Horn of Africa, the Cabo Cabo Delgado crisis is a pretty small one, and I haven't even mentioned the problem in the DRC. So the real reason it's getting any attention is because of the massive LNG investment that's in that area, and that is keeping a slight focus on what's going on. Also, the support to Mozambique. I mean, you take the major humanitarian development and security support that the European Union have been providing over the last 5 years. This is, in terms of security, this is the biggest spend globally for the European Union outside of Ukraine. So it's not as if money is not being supplied, but it's simply not feeding into a broader, more sustainable strategy that will climb us out in a sustainable way out of this particular set of challenges that are in play. This is a massive structural set of challenges that are there, which is going to take a very, very long time to fix. And this is not a band-aid. This is not a band-aid solution territory. And unfortunately, what we're seeing at the moment is really not going to contribute, it seems to many of us watching this conflict, to the kind of sustainable solutions that are required.
And Piers, just in wrapping up, let's talk about the armed groups that are kidnapping young boys and young girls. Girls are getting married off, and young boys turned into child soldiers. Which groups are these, and have they confirmed that they're the ones who are doing this, and in terms of their modus operandi? Because clearly this is something that has been done across the continent and across the globe in certain areas.
Well, the evolution of every conflict is unique, and this insurgency has its own particular trajectory. Fundamentally located in internal problems, but one in which external elements have been slowly saddling in terms of the involvement of Islamic State in this. And there, I think it's also important to remember that there is a lot of opacity around the dynamics within this grouping itself, in terms of its leadership, in terms of its the numbers that are involved, how it operates, its evolving modalities, and so forth. Now, the abduction of children has been an ongoing issue for a number of years now. Some of those are used for various support functions within the insurgency itself, whether it be in terms of support for camp, for porterage, but also on the military side, from playing roles around surveillance, and even, as you've indicated, being equipped to actually fight. Now, we don't know the exact numbers, and it's speculative. We're also seeing abductions which are now being turned into ransom kidnappings. So they're being used by the insurgents in various parts for eliciting some kind of funding. So there's a range of factors involved here, and it is a smaller number in terms of children, and you've indicated this includes young women and young girls who are brought in as brides and so forth, and as sexual slaves. And there has been a number of these people who have been successfully rescued by the Mozambican and Rwandan and Salmon forces over the last few years. However, our insights into their experiences are limited. Some Mozambican organizations have done some sterling research. The Rural Mozambique Observatory, for example, has written a couple of reports on this kind of stuff, and I would encourage people who are interested to look into that further. But the picture is still very patchy, and one of the big challenges is to be able to do effective research in these areas, and this has been a space in which the Mozambican authorities have also been somewhat reluctant. So there's a lot more for us to find out.
Well, Piers, thank you for availing yourself for this discussion, and thank you for your time on Africa Update.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
That's Piers Piju who is an independent consultant, joining us on the line. It is 19 after 12 Central African time.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Umkhonto weSizwe Party's Deputy President John Hlophe has penned a letter to party leader Jacob Zuma slamming the spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela and Zuma's daughter Duduzile Zuma Sambutla for what he calls disruptive actions. Hlophe claims the pair are undermining the party's chief whip, stirring tensions within the MK party. To examine the tension within the MK party, we're joined by Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who is leading the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution and the head of the Department of History and Political Studies at the Nelson Mandela University. Prof, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you very much for having me, and a long time no here.
I know, but it's always a pleasure chatting to you. Now, let's unpack this, what is unfolding within the MK party. Now, they've experienced serious leadership shakeups, including the removal, firstly, of Mzwanele Manye as chief whip, Floyd Shivambu as Secretary General, and now Nhlamulo Ndlela from the parliamentary whippery team, alongside calls for Colleen Makhubela's ousting. What is happening within the...
Yeah, when the party rose to prominence, it was like a house on fire because the party did very well in terms of its electoral performance. But the challenges of the party are not threats which are coming from the outside, but are threats which are coming from the inside. And I think a house that is divided against itself cannot stand. So it looks like to me there is a lack of opening up the political space to people who are from the outside. We saw what had happened to Floyd. We saw what is happening now. We see what is happening now with Colleen Makhubela. So there seems to be a backlash from people who were in the initial stages of the formation of the party, who don't want to allow others coming from outside to take over the party. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that most of the decisions of the party, they revolve around one person. That's an open secret. Former President Zuma, yes, is the founding father, but I think the dust has settled now. The party needs to hold a conference because there is no voice of the rank and file of the branches. And to me, that is posing a threat. And the party must keep in mind that elections are just around the corner. So the party needs to sort out its internal problems if the party wants to do well in the upcoming local government elections.
Now, with the former Judge President John Hlophe, who is the Deputy President and caucus leader, now he's taken a firm stance in addressing what he feels are issues against Nhlamulo Ndlela and Duduzile. And he's done this publicly with the letters that he's written to the party president, Jacob Zuma. How does his leadership style and his decision to do this publicly just show or pose a risk to his way of dealing with issues and his style of handling crisis, I guess? Because I should presume that this would go back to his way of doing things as a former judge president.
Of course. This is quite interesting because there has not been a confirmation from him that the letters were written by himself. There is a denial that whether is he the one or not who wrote those letters. On the other hand, there has been a confirmation that is informal regarding the validity of those letters. So I don't know what are the politics, but let me put it like this. You can see that there are politics which are at play here. So it looks like this is done on purpose in public, but at the same time there is some kind of denialism in terms of the originality of those letters. Of course, the leadership issues, they come into play regarding how he manages conflicts, because how do you write letters and they end up in the public domain without reaching those people that they are intended for? So this also is, I guess maybe the rationale behind was also character assassination, you know what I mean? Because you're mentioning people's names. But the worst part of it is that some of the people who have been removed, you spoke about them, you've named names, normally they don't bounce back to those positions. So this also speaks to the future implications of this for these two people, that they might not be occupying senior positions in future.
Now, with the chief whip, Colleen Makubela's, she's receiving a lot of backlash, with some MPs labeling her a political novice and criticizing her stance on issues like Israel. Now, to what extent are these criticisms rooted in genuine ideological differences versus factional power struggles? And how might these impact or affect these positions for especially her as a chief whip?
I don't think that this is about the ideological outlook of the party, because those issues, if they are an issue, they need to be addressed at conference in terms of what the party stands for. So that has not occurred, because it's only when you circulate documents and say that we have this upcoming conference, therefore read this and that, and then you iron out those issues at the conference. But now there are different understandings and interpretations, because the party has not held a conference to provide ideological clarity in terms of what the party stands for. So that issue then falls away of ideological clashes. The issue is about the political space that has not been open for people who are new to play a role in they are seen to be a threat. And I know it comes down to the fact that, but where were you when we were campaigning here? Do you know how we got these seats? So now you are coming here to dictate to us this and that, how the party must be run, or now you are providing a strategic directional party in terms of where the party needs to go to. So again, it's an issue of power as well. So it has less to do with the ideological framework of the party.
And the MK Party, you've also mentioned it, founded by Jacob Zuma in 2023, they've positioned themselves as a significant player in South Africa's politics, especially looking at their performance in the 2024 elections. Now, given the current strife, internal strife and leadership turnover, how may these challenges influence the party's long-term viability and its ability to challenge the African National Congress, which is its main aim, so to speak, and other major parties in future elections?
Look, the party broke away from the ANC. That's why it was able to outmaneuver it and to curtail it in terms of its hegemony. The party has done very well, because the party, I think, has outmaneuvered the ANC, because the ANC is no longer a dominant party. One party dominance is a thing of the past. But the threat to the party doesn't come outside the party. The threats of the party, they come from the inside. Because you have people now, they are taking a step back, crossing swords against each other, instead of aiming at their enemy. By enemy, I'm talking about the system. They say they want to totally overhaul, the economic structure, the political system. They want to Africanize things, So I think that should be the focus. But again, the way out is to introduce democracy so that ordinary members can take a decision by themselves.
How do they then sort out these issues, firstly?
Yeah.
And how does former President Jacob Zuma handle the crisis before it becomes an even bigger crisis for the MK Party?
The party needs to envisage a situation whereby it exists after Zuma. The party needs to outlive former President Zuma. There is nothing wrong to honor him. It's all well and good to respect him, to acknowledge his political contribution to the party. Yes, you can give him that status, he's the founding father, whatever, but then you need to introduce democracy so that decisions don't revolve around him. That is undemocratic. How does the party question whether does South Africa have a democracy or not? But on the other hand, the party doesn't practice democracy itself. Former President Zuma has an issue with the electoral outcomes. He says that it was undemocratic, it was not the will of the people, so he's questioning democracy. On the other hand, he doesn't want to entrench democracy within the party itself. He needs to provide leadership at the moment and make sure that there is a conference. That's the contribution he can make to the party, which will live for generations to come.
Well, Prof, it's always a pleasure. We'll leave it there for
Thank
today.
you very
Thank
much.
you for joining us on Africa Update. That's Ntsikelelo Breakfast, leading the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution and the head of the Department of History and Political Studies at the Nelson Mandela University, joining us on the line. It is 12:30 and our news headlines up next with Jolani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Making headlines. Nigeria's opposition is facing growing uncertainty ahead of the 2027 general elections, with fresh cracks emerging. In the newly formed All Democratic Alliance, former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi has confirmed he will contest the election, but has ruled out the possibility of running a joint ticket with former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. The acting mayor of Johannesburg in South Africa, Kenny Kunene, is expected to resume operations targeting hijacked buildings in the city's central business district today. Yesterday, Kunene and law enforcement officers raided a hijacked building in Marshalltown, which led to arrests of over 40 undocumented foreign nationals. And finally, a report into the fire at an electricity substation that caused the shutdown of London's Heathrow Airport in March has found that the root cause was a preventable technical fault. The National Energy System operator said the problem had been identified 7 years ago, but no action was taken. I will have details on these and other stories at 1 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you to Jolani Tulongwepe with our news headlines, and we say good afternoon to Figile Lingwati with our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, Lulu. We're better off with cricket news. Proteas left arm spinner Keshav Maharaj has been ruled out of the second test against Zimbabwe due to a left groin strain. The captain for the series sustained the injury while batting on day 3 of the first test on Monday. He will return home for further assessment to determine the extent of the injury. Sanuran Manthusamy has been named as his replacement, while all-rounder Vian Mulder will lead the side in the second test, which begins on the 6th of July. Fast bowler Lungingidi, who was set to join the squad on Wednesday, has been released to give the Seamers, who impressed in the first test, another opportunity to build on their performances. Now, football news. SABC News has reliably learned that the South African Football Association and SASOL, the main sponsor of women's football in the country, have failed to come to the terms on a new agreement, and that their 16-year-long partnership has come to an end. The contract between SAFA and the Global Chemicals and Energy Company was first established in 2009 and was crucial in developing and promoting women's football in South Africa. It extended to both the women's national team and the SASOL League, the semi-professional league in the country. Banyana are currently in Morocco preparing to defend their Women's Africa Cup of Nations title they won for the first time in 2022. It's uncertain how the latest developments will affect Banyana and the league. Attempts to get comments from SAFA have been unsuccessful so far. Now on to rugby news. The Springboks midfielder Jesse Krill's audition to captain of the Springboks was a successful one last weekend against the Barbarians, so much so that he will lead the side into battle and officially become the 67th captain as the Boks went as close to full strength as possible for their first test against Italy at Loftus Versfeld on Saturday. Kriel is in because regular captain Siya Kolisi, who withdrew from last weekend's match on the eve of the game with a stiff neck, is still struggling with a few niggles. But there is little cause for concern in the Bok camp at the moment. Coach Rasi Erasmus said that Kolisi had a stiff Achilles and it was decided as a precaution to keep him out of the game and let Marco van Staden, who came in at last minute for him last week, start again for his 26th test match. Cricket tennis news now. In Wimbledon, an emotional Coco Gauff said she will need to make changes to be successful at Wimbledon after she was knocked out in the first round on a day of shocks at the All England Club. The American second seed was beaten 7-6, 7-3, 6-1 by Ukraine world number 42nd Diana Yamstreska on a packed court, one under the roof.
Changing my playing style a little bit, which is difficult because for me, it's like I approach clay and I play this one way for however long clay season is, 6 to 8 weeks, or I don't know. And then I feel like when I go hard, I don't have to change as much, but I still have to adjust it a little bit. And I know in grass I do. And I feel like by the time I find it, it's, already time to play, and it's difficult. But I don't know. I have faith that I can make these adjustments. I can do well here. I really do want to do well here. I'm not someone who wants to write myself off grass this early in my career, but I definitely need to make some changes if I want to be successful here.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. The Upside. Your afternoons just got even better.
Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Simpiwe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever. We are the Upside. Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
We say thank you to Figile Lingwati with our sports update, and good afternoon to Buntle Headbush with our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Lulu, and a very good afternoon to our listeners. In our top business story at this hour, ratings agency Moody's has slashed its rating on Afreximbank, taking it closer to junk status a month after Fitch Ratings did the same. This is the African lender's second downgrade in 4 weeks. Moody's cited weaker than expected asset performance for the downgrade and warned that its access to funding sources was shrinking. The ratings company lowered Afreximbank to Baa2 from Baa1. The African Development Bank in South Africa says the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, is key to the development of the country. It says if AGOA is not renewed in September this year, many jobs will be lost, especially manufacturing and agricultural sector jobs. African Development Bank country economist in South Africa, Akona Peter, speaking to the SABC at the launch of the 2025 South Africa Country Report in Pretoria, says the country has to diversify its trade relations should AGOA not be renewed.
The renewal of AGOA will be very important, not just for South Africa, but some of also the SACU countries. but very important for agriculture, the farmers that currently receive preferential export tariffs to America. So if it's not renewed and we receive a very high trade tariff, it's going to cause a lot of jobs.
The South African Revenue Service says the country has recorded a preliminary trade balance surplus of $1.2 billion in May, which has been attributable to an increase in exports, which is inclusive of trade with Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho and Namibia. Import flows increased on the back of higher imports of crude oil, artificial corundum and telephone sets, including smartphones and other telephones. Trade analyst Viwen Tongwana elaborates.
Well, the commodities that are at play, madam, are citrus is one of them, gold and platinum. So that is those are the commodities that we can look at. But then also, I think what is quite interesting and inspiring for me are the customs union, the countries that are at play, which are Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, and Namibia. And I think for me, it can be a sample of what intra-African trade could look like in the future if we take it more seriously.
The Paramount Media Company in the United States has settled a lawsuit brought against it by U.S. President Donald Trump. It's agreed to pay $16 million over a CBS interview with then U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris on the 60 Minutes news program. Trump alleged the interview breached a consumer protection law in Texas. Paramount says the settlement includes no apology and that the payout will go entirely towards a future Trump presidential library. The Quad countries, Australia, India, Japan and the United States, say they're launching a critical minerals initiative to cut reliance on Chinese rare earth metals. Meeting in Washington, the foreign ministers pledged to diversify supply chains to boost economic security and collective resilience. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says the Quad countries could work better together on such issues.
In addition to the bilateral relationships we have with each of the three partner nations that are here, it's also important within this forum to turn it into one where we begin to focus on specific issues that we want to work together on and begin to deliver action on those issues. And today's the next step in that process.
And now taking a look at our indicators at this hour, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 534. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 16. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 58. In Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 85. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 44. Russia, 78 rubles 36. In India, it's 85 rupees 58. China, 7 yuan 16. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 62 cents this afternoon. $1 is trading at 72 pence to the British pound and 84 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,343 per ounce and platinum at $1,378 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $67.53 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, thank you to Buntle Hedbush with our business news. It is 12:43 Central African Time and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. A new journal, Born Too Soon, Progress, Priorities and Pivots for Preterm Birth, has been published and expands on the content from the 2023 WHO report. That is the World Health Organization, Born Too Soon, a decade of action on preterm. Now, the report, led by PMNCH, comprises of 10 papers and makes crucial findings on preterm birth and newborn care. And to elaborate further, we are joined on the line by Professor Joy Lawn, a lead author of of the report and a professor of maternal, reproductive and child health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Prof, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Pleasure speaking to you from Dar es Salaam, and had many happy years living in Cape Town, actually.
Oh, wow, Prof. So you've been around, and one day we'll talk about the different places that you've been stationed at and working from. Now, there were contributions from 95 authors across 67 organizations, representing 29 countries. Starting off, which countries were part of the contributions, and was anything new revealed by them? And before you get there, why was this report done?
Yeah, thank you. So this report, Born Too Soon, talks about a universal problem, both in rich and low-income countries. So babies who are born preterm, before 37 weeks of gestation, and that affects 13.4 million babies every year. So part of the reason we had this big team is twofold. First of all, this big problem, which is at the top of the burden of disease and really robbing families all over the world, hasn't changed in the last decade, and we need to change it. And really exciting to see the collaboration that came together. We had the Director General of WHO leading the opening part of this journal supplement and speaking on the launch last week. And as you say, 95 authors from almost 30 countries on every continent, including South Africa. And across those, we have really two different aspects of learning. So we have case studies from 13 countries on every continent that are making progress. And we also have family stories from 9 different countries. And you're asking, who can we learn from? So I would pick 2 out of that. So India, over the last 10 years, has doubled their rate of progress for newborns surviving. And they've done that by India's own government investing in neonatal care. So 10 years ago, they had less than 100 neonatal units in the country. Now they have more than 1,000. And the Indian government are spending about $1 billion a year on that. So one of the things we highlight is this need for leadership. And I would also highlight another country, Tanzania, where I'm sitting at the moment. So this is a country that's in the top 5 for numbers of preterm births around the world and hasn't been making progress. But the female president here, Her Excellency Samia Hussein, has really taken a personal interest in preterm birth. And the country is building more neonatal units, looking at how to have more nurses. So I think that's something that we could copy right across Africa.
Now, just looking at a country like Tanzania, what sort of steps do they take to make the progress? You've touched on the nursing staff. You've touched on different aspects of staffing to ensure that, they come out from being among the top 5 in the world where there is a crisis when it comes to preterm birth. How do they get it right?
Yeah, thanks. And that's something we've tried to be very practical about in these papers, what is needed. So for these 13.4 million pregnancies, so both the woman and the baby affected, that happen every year, we need 2 big things. One is to do better on prevention. So that's about the health of women, care of women who are pregnant, not having too many teenage pregnancies, looking at infections in pregnancy and women's rights as well. And then the place where we can have the biggest impact at the moment is better care of those vulnerable preterm babies. And there, it's not like just dropping one injection from the sky. We have to be able to keep these babies warm, support their breathing. They're very vulnerable to infections. So we actually need neonatal care wards. And I think the thing that's been transformative and particularly impressive in Tanzania is having one coordinated plan. So looking across the country to say they have 27 regions, how many of those have a hospital that can really lead better care in that region? And then they need 146 new district hospitals. So this is a really big jump. So learning on how to do that. So let's not waste having 146 architects. Let's have a standard floor plan. So for those who are interested, you can go to www.newborntoolkit.org and download like floor plans, nurse training, so that we're not wasting time by repeating those learnings each time. And then here in Tanzania, with that coordinated plan for 146 hospitals and what the gap is, both for space and for staff and for stuff to make it work, having one plan means that different funders in the government or other donors can work together to go faster. And it's such a privilege to see that happening here in Tanzania.
Let's talk about conflict areas, Prof, and how the marginalized populations have been impacted.
Yeah, that's so important. And we see every day on the news heartbreak for what's happening, in the Middle East and in many continents, and also across Africa. South Sudan, I was born just over the border, getting
All right, we seem to have, there she is.
Children
the
are
professor's back. Prof, we lost you there for a second. Please just start where you were born, just across the border.
Yes, I was saying we have so many places across Africa with conflict and fragile contexts that aren't getting attention, such as South Sudan. So around the world, 1 in 10 of the world's preterm babies are born in conflict settings, and they also often face climate threats and other threats. And in those contexts, the most vulnerable person are these tiny preterm babies, maybe a kilo, and really needing support and care. And this is something that is crucial. And in the series of papers with Born Too Soon, we have a very practical checklist of things that can be done even in these conflict settings to protect these vulnerable babies.
Now, looking at the focus that is on human rights law, it is the first time that this is happening when it comes to preterm births and a strategy being put in place, and it's just about laying the groundwork and implementation. How important is this to reduce preterm births?
Yeah, thank you for that. And, I learned so much when I was in South Africa about HIV and AIDS movement. And what was really critical there is the rights. Why should somebody who has HIV or AIDS in South Africa die when people in other countries were getting treatment? And we haven't applied that for vulnerable babies. And in many ways, also women's rights are under threat. So taking the human rights instruments and saying that every newborn, everywhere, even the most vulnerable, should have a right to have basic care, to survive, and also to thrive, and to see how we do that. And in this day and age where many rights are under threat, and indeed with a lot of donor funding, the news yesterday suggests that maybe 14 million extra deaths will happen because of USAID donor funding. It's really critical that we stand up for the most vulnerable and find ways to make sure that their rights are met wherever they are.
Well, Prof, it has been a pleasure chatting to you about this, and thank you so much for making time to chat to us.
And thank you for covering it and for all that you do. It's much appreciated.
So much, Prof. That's Professor Joy Lawn, a lead author of the report and a professor of maternal, reproductive and child health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, joining us on the line. It is 12:53 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Bana Boy huyo anajulikana kama Damini Ebunoluwa Ogolo, maarufu kama Bana Boy. Alizaliwa Julai 2 mwaka 1991. Ni mwimbaji na mwandishi wa nyimbo kutoka nchini Nigeria. Alipata umaarufu mnamo mwaka 2012 baada ya kutoa wimbo wake wa kwanza kabisa ambao ulijulikana kwa jina la Like to Party kutoka ndani ya studio Live 2013. Mnamo mwaka wa 2017 Bana Boy alisaini na bendi Habit Atlantic Records huko Marekani na One Music Group. Albamu yake ya tatu ya studio ya nje 2018 iliweka alama ya kwanza ya lebo yake. Mnamo mwaka 2019 alishinda sheria ya kimataifa ya bora kabisa kwenye tuzo za BET za 2019. Alitangazwa pia kama msanii wa Apple Music's Up Next.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
Over 40 undocumented foreign nationals have been arrested for occupying hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg in the Gauteng province of South Africa. This follows an inspection conducted by the city officials led by the acting executive mayor, Kenny Gunene. The inspection was aimed at restoring the city's dignity. This as the city has seen an alarming increase in the number of hijacked buildings that are not conducive for people to occupy. Tabela reports.
Shacks erected inside the 4-story building, separated by cardboards, a stench welcomes you as you enter the dilapidated building filled with water puddles streaming from a leaking drain. A creche, meant to be a safe place, has compromised the safety of children with electric wires exposed, sparking as a result of illegal connections. Johannesburg Acting Executive Mayor Kenny Gunene says the city is in severe debt as a result of illegal electricity connections from hijacked buildings.
We are calling on all the other private owners of the buildings to come forward. We are declaring war on these illegal buildings. Those that have been hijacked, that have private owners, we want them to come forward. Those that do not have owners, we are going to expropriate as the city so that we can put them in the inventory of the buildings of the city, so that as we embark on this program to revitalize Johannesburg and the surrounding suburbs, then we know which buildings we must target.
Gunene has called for stringent immigration laws in order to curb the scourge of undocumented foreign nationals in the inner city.
We will come back, take out South Africans that are here to an alternative shelter and demolish this quarter camp that is in here. Hand over the building to the owner, but also see how do we then assist the owner if they want to renovate the building or if they want to sell the building, so that the syndicates don't hijack the building.
He says undocumented foreign nationals will be deported to their countries of origin, and plans have been put in place to demolish the buildings.
We've also gotten illegal immigrants. They have passports, some of them, with the same stamp. The same stamp is on a passport from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe, the same stamp. So it's clear that there's somebody who has got a fraudulent stamp that they use on the passports of these illegal immigrants.
Gunene says more raids will be conducted and syndicates will face the full bite of the law. I'm Nomtigalelo Mtabela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, it is that time of the day where we say good afternoon and a happy Wednesday to Matseho. How are you today? The outside team. There's a full team now, so it's quite... I'm loving this.
Yes, we're a duo now, and we've got a wonderful team behind the scenes. So coming up on the show today, I really want to keep it pithy because I want you to stay listening. It's a really wholesome show today. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking cookbooks. Ooh. There's a South African cookbook that won a top award at the Global Cookbook Awards. Ooh. So we're going to find out about this heart healthy cookbook and what it's all about. I think food is a big theme this winter season. So that's coming through. And then in the golden hour of our show, that's the middle hour, we're going to look at African tourism, the future of African tourism, what that looks like. And we're going to be looking at cruise ships and all sorts of really wonderful things. And then we have a conversation with South Africa's most irreverent puppet, and he's going to be coming through, Conrad Koch. We all know him as Chester Missing.
Yes.
So it's going to be wonderful to catch up with him and have a few laughs in this midweek.
Well, that's all coming up now on The Upside with Matsuho and Tabuho. It is going to be a very interesting one. And, Casper, it's going to be, so you stay tuned for that. And the cookbooks. And, it's all about the food this season. Yeah, something to look forward to. That's coming up at the top of the hour. And from myself, Lulu Gaboo, and the Africa Update team, it's been a good day. Do stay warm. And thank you to our producer, Tracy Bumgard, technical operator, Bongi Moyo, and social media, Elaine Bengani. Have a good one, and let's do this again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations,
Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems.
join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions
In the digital era, Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers,
and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage.
You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za.
This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers
Across the continent, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Nigeria's opposition is facing growing uncertainty ahead of the 2027 general elections, with fresh cracks emerging in the newly formed All Democratic Alliance. Former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi has confirmed he will contest the election, but has ruled out the possibility of running on a joint ticket with former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. The decision has stirred debate about the future of the alliance, which was meant to unite key opposition figures under one front. Political analyst Austin Aigbe.
The Nigerians are looking for an alternative, that what they need is not a PDP as an opposition. What they need is not a Labour Party as an opposition. They don't even need an NPP. Those are the three major parties who ran against the APC in 2023. At this time, they are no longer viable because the opposition has been literally diminished. So a new party is what may likely wrestle power in